12 Days of Christmas Memories. Episode 13 of our Life and Time Stories. A Christmas Story by Simeon G. Silverio, Jr., publisher and editor, San Diego Asian Journal, the leading Filipino-American newspaper in San Diego, California, published in the December 19, 2008, issue of the San Diego Asian Journal. First day of Christmas. It was December 1958. He was 11 years old and living in the Quiapo district of Manila in the Philippines. 12 days before Christmas, on December 14th, a Sunday, he walked around his downtown neighborhood to see and enjoy the Christmas preparations for the season. On Plateria Street, where they lived in an apartment above their father's printing press business, members of the Comité de Festejos Feast Committee, the volunteer group in charge of the preparations for Quiapo's January 9th fiesta celebration, were busy hanging a long line of bright Christmas bulbs crisscrossed from one house to another across the street. Earlier that week, his mother contributed 50 pesos for those lights, which brightened not only the Yuletide season, but also the fiesta atmosphere in the neighborhood. That morning, he and his siblings took out their colorful Christmas light decorations and adorned the office of the printing press. By the end of the week, when the school was out, beautiful lanterns would be added to the decor, thanks to his mother's talented pupils at the Juan Sumulong Elementary School in Santa Cruz, Manila. Every year his mother would select the most beautiful lantern projects her pupils had made. As their reward for their selected masterpieces, they would be given the honor of having their lanterns displayed in the printing press. As far as he could remember, no pupil had ever complained about the confiscation of the lanterns, which they could have otherwise displayed in their own homes. It may be due to his mom's strict demeanor in class, or the good grades with which she rewarded the pupils who made the selected lanterns. Along Carrito Street, the shoe store capital of the country, merchants were busy putting up their own Christmas decorations. Sunday was supposed to be their day of rest, the only day during the week when all stores, except restaurants, were closed. But that day, store owners and their families were outside, hanging up the Christmas lights and lanterns, and even installing a display in the show windows in front of their stores. On Plaza Miranda, a makeshift stage was being built. From the 16th of December up to the Quiapo Fiesta celebration on January 9th, amateur singing and combo contests as well as variety shows featuring stage and movie stars would be presented on that stage every evening from 7 p.m. to midnight. Those shows were sponsored by the different merchants in the area as part of their promotional campaigns for their businesses. Since there were very few television sets during that time, the stage shows in Plaza Miranda had become much-awaited free events for area residents and outsiders alike. After all, Quiapo was just one jeepney ride away, even during midnight or early in the morning when the free shows were usually over. It was during those times when big television and movie personalities started their careers and were discovered, like the Raycard duet, who became a top draw in Las Vegas, Eddie Mesa, the Elvis Presley of the Philippines, Fred Pinocchio, the singing cowboy, Cora Adahar, the female Elvis Presley, the top combo groups of the day like the Gay Toppers and the Jitterbugs, and a lot more. Quiapo Church, which attracted hundreds, if not thousands of worshippers each day, was being spruced up with a new coat of paint and adorned with bright lights in preparation for the Yuletide season and the fiesta celebration. By nightfall, the lights in the streets of Quiapo would light up, and everyone would welcome the tradition with joy. Let the Christmas celebration, the longest ever celebrated all over the world, everyone would utter to themselves, "Begin!" Second day of Christmas. In the classroom, he was shaping a stick of bamboo with a knife to make a lantern as part of his school project. During the daily half-hour work education class, students like him were required to work on an individual class project. This time it was a lantern in time for Christmas. He first bought a 30-inch piece of bamboo from the market and split it into small sticks. After he had shaped each stick, he would tie them together on either end to form the star frame of the lantern. He would then cover the frame with colorful paper called papel de hapon, Japanese paper, and put decorations around it. It normally took him a week, with only half an hour each day, to finish the lantern. One of his classmates, Ricardo Pena, would bring some sticks of bamboo to work on during the half-hour periods. After a few days, he would submit the most beautiful and colorful lantern, earning him a high grade. The feat was no longer a surprise. Ricardo would always submit the most beautiful, finished project during the year, be it a lantern or a beautiful wood cut out of an animal like an elephant, giraffe, or a parrot perched on a piece of wire and painted with beautiful colors. Everybody knew he could not possibly make those projects by himself and that someone in his household did them for him. But their teacher would always turn a blind eye and give him high marks for each creation. The projects were always proudly displayed in the classroom as proof to visiting school supervisors and higher authorities how capable the school's students were of producing such outstanding and beautiful projects. Third day of Christmas. It was December 16th, the start of the Simbang Gabi, or Dawn Mass, a Filipino Christmas tradition that was part of a 9-day novena leading to Christmas Eve. His mother woke him up at 3:30 in the morning so they could attend the Mass at the nearby Quiapo Church, which was just 3 blocks away from their house. But the morning was so cold and his slumber was so deep, he passed up the opportunity and opted to resume his sleep. The night before, he was so excited he reminded his mom and his other siblings to make sure he was awakened so he could attend the Mass with them. But that was the night before, when he was not sleepy and the weather was not too cold. Fourth day of Christmas. After school, they passed by the Catholic Trade Center, the store of the nearby Espiritu Santo Parish Church, on their way home to buy Christmas cards to be given to friends. They rode in their family car, driven by their driver, Riz, who picked them up every day at school and brought them home to their house in Quiapo, about 6 kilometers away. Fifth day of Christmas. It was his birthday, exactly a week before Christmas and 2 weeks before New Year's Day. Whatever day of the week his birthday would fall, so would December 25th of that year and January 1st of the following year. That year, he had pined for a ukulele on his birthday. It was a fad then, brought about by the influence of Elvis Presley and other rock and roll idols of the 50s. He didn't know how to play the instrument, yet he had his heart set on owning one. For days, he pestered his dad for a ukulele as a birthday gift until his father relented. At 10 o'clock that morning, his father brought him along on his daily coffee shop meeting with his friends at the Alex Soda Fountain on the corner of Rizal Avenue and P. Paterno Streets. While everyone was having coffee, he had a glass of Magnolia chocolate milk and an egg pie. He hardly touched his food, as he was so eager to get his birthday gift. Afterwards, his father brought him to Rayon Street, the Tin Pan Alley of the Philippines, where record stores were abundant. He chose a tan-colored ukulele with the words "Around the World in 80 Days" written on it. It was a tribute to the movie of the same title that was showing in Manila at that time. Through the times he fancied the instrument, the only tune he learned to play it with were the first few chords of Paul Anka's song, Diana. During Christmas time, there was a Christmas card delivery service at their school. Cards were deposited in a box near the principal's office. Then, a student would deliver them to their recipients in different classrooms. He sent out 20 cards to his classmates, but only received 5 from them in return. Another classmate got 12. Later, they found out this classmate had sent himself all of the cards to give the impression he was popular. That evening, his family went to Wanam's restaurant on Evangelista Street for his birthday dinner. It was always the place of celebrations for momentous events in their lives, like birthdays, graduations, and anniversaries. His father ordered their usual fare: fried chicken, pancit canton, lapu-lapu con salsa, camarón rebozado, and lumpiang Shanghai. To this day, he still longed for those dishes, cooked a la Wanam style. They simply seemed to taste much better compared to their counterparts today. Wanam's fried chicken, he swore, was more delicious than anything served today. Its hot sweet sauce complemented the meat very well. The sauce of the fish lapu-lapu was one of a kind, while the shrimp in camarón rebozado was sweeter than the gummy morsels of today. So were the much more delicious pancit canton and lumpiang Shanghai of Wanam's. At 11 years old, he had many more birthdays ahead of him and memories to treasure and share. Sixth day of Christmas. It was the last day of school before the Christmas vacation. He submitted his lantern project, which he worked on until late in the evening the night before. He got a good grade, although his lantern was not that pretty. He believed his teacher put into consideration her friendship with his mother, her co-teacher, when grading his project. But for his mother, his lantern was the most beautiful as she hung it up in the printing press at the center of the other lanterns she confiscated, selected from her students. They did not have lessons that day. The only event planned was a Christmas program. His classmates, Edmundo Belen, belted a rendition of the popular calypso song, Coconut. And Oscar Pena sang Deo to the delight of all. Mrs. Rosario, his beautiful mestiza teacher, appeared Christmassy with her green and red attire and a Santa Claus cap. But her daughter, Teresita, who was also their classmate, was the object of interest of the boys in their class. Seventh day of Christmas. It was Saturday, the first day of their Christmas vacation. Rees, the driver, dropped him and his siblings off at their maternal grandparents' house on Pepin Street, Sampaloc, Manila, where they would spend their weekend. It was a chance to play with their cousins, who lived with their families in a cluster of homes across the street of their grandparents' house. In the evening, together with his 3 other cousins, Pabling, Ray, and Benny, he went door to door singing Christmas carols in the neighborhood, just like the other kids. They only had his ukulele, which he could not play, 2 rocks, an empty gallon can of ice cream with one end covered with a piece of raincoat material to serve as a drum, and a pair of maracas as instruments. When they divided their loot among themselves, they got 25 centavos each, the most money they had ever earned in their lives. Christmas carols, both in the street and on radio, filled the air. 8th day of Christmas, Sunday Fathers. They woke up at their grandparents' house at 3 o'clock in the morning for the early dawn mass or simbang gabi. By 3:30, everybody, including their grandmother, aunts, and cousins, had gathered on the street to walk towards the Aglapayan Church on Concepcion Street, a few blocks away. Their maternal great-grandparents belonged to the Aglapayan Church, or Philippine Independent Church, which broke off from the Roman Catholic Church during the Philippine Revolution before the turn of the 20th century. His father's family, on the other hand, remained with the Roman Catholic Church. For the children, the 2 churches were no different, as they believed it was just a matter of family tradition. Their grandmother would occasionally attend the Aglapayan Church or Roman Catholic Church, depending on convenience. The walk to the church was exciting. It was very cold, even while they were wearing their thick sweaters. Along the way, they enjoyed the sights of the multicolored lights and lanterns that adorned the windows of the houses in the neighborhood. The only remaining nipa hut in the street always had the most beautiful lantern in the area. A talented son of the homeowner, whom they never saw, made it. He had leprosy, and he was always confined inside the house lest nosy neighbors might report him to the authorities and have him committed to the leprosarium. That Christmas, he made a huge circular lantern shaped like a house. With the lit candle inside and soft wind blowing, images of animals appeared and went around like a carousel. Their clan filled up 4 pews of the medium-sized church. Bishop Isabelo de los Reyes Jr. officiated the Mass, with his sons serving as altar boys. Aglapayan priests are allowed to marry and have a family. After the Mass, they lined up towards the life-size image of Jesus the Nazarene to kiss his feet, an act of devotion. He was aware a lot of people had kissed on the same spot before him, so he put his hand over the foot and kissed the back of his hand. He knew God wouldn't save him with a miracle by preventing him from catching a virus. They were all relieved when the long Mass finally ended, which they observed while occasionally dozing off. On their way home, they passed by a bakery and knocked on the side door. They were allowed in and saw bakers kneading dough, cutting the dough into pieces, and putting the pieces inside the oven as they baked pandesal, dinner roll, which was the breakfast staple of most Filipinos. They bought 3 dozen of the freshly baked and still hot bread, which they ate on their way home. Ninth day of Christmas, Monday. Back in their house in Quiapo, he walked around the neighborhood after dinner to see and enjoy the various Christmas displays in the area. On Querido Street, Valison department store had a mannequin of Santa Claus. Santa was waving at window shoppers while carrying a bag of toys across his right shoulder. The display at Otis department store depicted a Philippine barrio scene with a nipa hut and mannequins dressed in Philippine attire, barong Tagalog for men and patadyong costume for women. The most exciting display for him was always the Everlast toy store on Rayon Street. That year, it had a giant robot that hovered over a group of children who looked excited rather than afraid as they held on to their toys. The other displays to see in the area were those in the first-run movie theaters along Rizal Avenue, like State, Ever Avenue, Universal, and Ideal. They featured huge Christmas lanterns, if not big, brightly lit Christmas trees in their lobbies. Along Escolta Street, the premier commercial center at that time, prominent stores like Botica Boy, Berg's, Sims, Soriente Santos, and others beckoned shoppers with dazzling arrays of Christmas displays. Sidewalk vendors along Rizal Avenue were promoting the best-selling toy that year, a plastic Dinky Doo doll, a dark baby with huge eyes that could cling to a post like Monkey. When he returned to their house, the printing press was still operating to full capacity. A complete set of night shift people were working through the night until early in the morning to meet the deadlines for the orders of calendars that would be given away by merchants during the Christmas season. He was not sleepy yet and walked to the nearby Plaza Miranda to watch the ongoing stage show. It was an amateur night that evening. The MC was a guy called Nanong Pandak, Mariano the Shorty, who never rose to prominence above the provincial and city stage shows where he performed. There was a character in Kenkoi comic strip also called Nanong Pandak. Perhaps the MC took his name after the character so that the latter's popularity would somehow rub off on him. Every contestant was being given a bag full of goodies, courtesy of the evening's sponsor, Good Earth Emporium. A judge would stop a contestant in the midst of his song if he sang out of tune by sounding a bell. Most of the time, the contestants only wanted to have the goodies. Hence, they would join the contest without any preparations and intentions to win. Often, the bell would ring after only 1 or 2 bars of the songs, and the singer would be awarded the goodies as a consolation prize. It was decades before the highly popular American Idol television program of today would discover that capitalizing on the somewhat funny, if not humiliating, antics of prospective idols during audition shows would be downright entertaining. When he returned to the printing press at midnight, his mother had already ordered pancit bihon and hot pan de sal for the pressmen to eat during their break. The pancit bihon they bought from a Chinese restaurant along Villa Lobos Street was very delicious and dripping with oil. The pan de sal was freshly baked and crunchy. 10th day of Christmas, Tuesday. Paulino Tanco, a Chinese friend of his father, brought 5 baskets, all wrapped in colorful cellophane paper of Christmas goodies. Every year, Paulino would bring those gifts, which would consist of a ham, queso de bola, cheese ball, boxes of cookies, candies, and fruits. That year, in addition to a cloth for his mother, Paulino also gave a separate gift to their maid Milagring. It seemed Milagring, a pretty lass from Samar province in the Visayas, would flirt with him every time he came for a visit. Maybe Paulino, a married man, just took a fancy to her and gave her a gift of her own. Prosody Bram Paulino, a paper dealer, was sponsored by his father when the Chinese businessman applied for naturalized Filipino citizenship. As a result, Paulino was forever grateful to his dad. Paulino and his father would sometimes eat at San Jacinto, a Chinese restaurant on David Street in Chinatown, and watch a movie together. They became close friends. His father eventually asked Paulino to stand in as baptismal sponsor to his youngest child. Unfortunately, Paulino died 5 years later from liver ailment. It was just 2 days before Christmas, and his mother brought them shopping for Christmas clothes and shoes. Everyone, including the poor in the country, could wear new clothes during Christmas Day. These days, the Filipino poor would be lucky to eat 1 meal a day. Days before, he already had an eye on a red shirt displayed at Berg's department store on Escolta and a pair of cowboy boots at Francis. a department store along Dasmariñas Street, which was parallel to Escolta. His other siblings would be contented with shoes from Shoe Mart, which was just a small shoe store on Rizal Avenue and Carriedo Streets at that time. Shoe Mart would become one of the biggest corporations in the Philippines, with huge malls all over the country. Its founder and owner, Henry Sy, is the richest Filipino today. After the shopping, his mother took him separately to Francis's for his shoes. An uncle, his tío, Uncle Tino, the brother of his mother, worked there as an accountant. Somehow, they were able to get a discount, although the final cost was still 3 times higher than the cost of the shoes his siblings got. The special boots, with high heels, black leather, pointed toes, and even miniature guns tucked on each side, made him the envy of his classmates whenever he wore the boots to school. Unfortunately, their parents were too busy to fulfill their promise and bring them around and see the various Christmas displays in the city. They had to supervise the printing and binding of calendars, as the deadlines were fast approaching. To make up for their broken promise, they asked their driver, Riz, to take them around by himself instead. Their huge 1949 Dodge used to be a limousine owned by a senator in the country. It had 2 folding seats in the middle and could seat as many as 10 people, especially if they were children. "We are all kids," Riz shouted once they were all inside the car. He was the son of a wealthy landowner in his father's barrio in Bintog, Plaridel, Bulacan. When Riz's mother died, his father remarried and their fortune dwindled. Riz's family first pawned and then eventually sold their property beside a chapel in the barrio to his father. In addition, his father gave Riz a job after he came out of the army. Riz was always wearing his fatigue army pants until they all got worn out. They first checked out the Christmas displays on the rooftop of the Magnolia Ice Cream Factory along Aurora Boulevard in Quezon City. From there, they proceeded to Cubao, where they watched the moving displays on the facade of COD department store. On their way home, they passed through Espana Extension and saw the display at the Ismail Steel compound. Ismail Steel was then the leading manufacturer of appliances and was owned by business tycoon Baby Ismail and his family. Yep, Baby was a guy, and he also managed his company's basketball team that competed for championships in a very popular commercial league against its perennial rival, the YCO Painters, owned by another business tycoon, Don Manolo Elizalde. 11th day of Christmas, Wednesday. It was Christmas Eve. The printing press was almost done with all of the calendar printing orders, and it would close for the day at 12 noon. His father would hand out the Christmas bonuses to the workers, and the shop would remain closed the next day, on Christmas. As soon as every worker had left, Riz poured water in an empty gasoline container as it was placed on top of 3 stones with firewood wood under it. He lit the firewood and placed a ham inside the container. He cooked the ham right in the center of the printing press office space, since there was no oven to cook it in. His mother took them to Everlast Department Store for their Christmas presents. They were denied the surprise of opening their gifts from Santa on the morning of Christmas Day. Instead, their parents were more practical and let them choose the Christmas toy they wanted for themselves. He chose a bow and arrow toy that year, while his sisters had dolls and his younger brothers toy cars. Their eldest, who was a teenager by then, asked for spending money instead. He spent the rest of the early evening watching the stage show in Plaza Miranda. On Christmas Eve and on the eve of the fiesta on January 9th, star-studded musical extravaganzas were always presented. There were a lot more people watching the show at that time, as many, if not all, would celebrate and go to the midnight mass at Quiapo Church afterwards. After the mass, they all gathered together at home for the traditional Noche Buena, a midnight repast during Christmas Eve. The ham was already cooked and sprinkled with white sugar, which they ate with sliced bread, queso de bola, hot dogs, hot chocolate, fruit and macaroni salads, and of course chicken and beef nilaga, a dish which his father always insisted to be served on such occasions. 12th day of Christmas, Thursday. There were no more surprises when they woke up on Christmas Day because they already got their Christmas gifts the day before. They ate the leftovers of the previous midnight's Noche Buena for breakfast and donned on their Christmas attires after taking their showers. They proceeded to their maternal grandparents' house in Sampaloc, where they were met by their whole clan. They got crispy centavo bills as Christmas gifts from their aunts and uncles after kissing their hands, which is an act of respect. Their grandfather let them pick with one hand a bunch of coins spread out on a table. It was difficult to pick up a few many, but one cousin knew better and spread a layer of glue on his hand. Many coins stuck to his palm, prompting his grandfather to add a new rule to his gimmick. One must do so with clean hands. He wanted to join his cousins to visit the cousin of his mother, Tia, amparing on nearby San Diego Street, a few blocks away from their grandparents' house. But they had to leave and go to their province in Bulacan to visit their paternal relatives. The trip by car was a 1-hour drive, and after lunch, his father handed out Christmas money to their provincial cousins. He did not expect gifts from their paternal aunts. They already had done so much in hosting them during their provincial vacations. Christmas in the province was more subdued, unlike in the city, where the street atmosphere, with lots of kids walking around and visiting their godparents and relatives, was more festive. They visited a few relatives who served them native delicacies they made themselves like biko, bibingka, espasol, and suman. His father, a poor boy from the area who made good in the city, played Santa Claus to his friends and relatives' children. The memories of his 12 days of Christmas 50 years ago, when he was 11 years old, growing up in the Philippines in 1958, still linger in his mind. Merry Christmas to all. Though nothing can bring back the hour of splendor in the grass, of glory in the flower, we will grieve not, rather find strength in what remains behind. Splendor in the Grass by William Wordsworth. The author, Simeon Silverio, Jr. Grew up to become the publisher and editor of the San Diego Asian Journal, a Filipino-American newspaper in San Diego, California, where he lives with his family. And that closes the book on this matter. This is episode 13 of the YouTube channel, Our Life and Other Stories. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, Our Life and Time Stories, to listen to more enjoyable stories like this. 12 Days of Christmas Stories is from the book Life and Other Matters by Simeon G. Silverio, Jr., published by Papyrus Books, with email address papyrusbooks@yahoo.com. To order a copy of the book, go to amazon.com and enter the name of the author, Simeon Silverio, in the browser.